Thank you. So we have Senator Wolk, followed by Senator Block, then Senator Stone, and Senator Allen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My concern is that this seems to me to need to go through a policy committee, or two, or three. I don't know. I mean, we've had triple referred bills on.
We're having one today.
It seems to me that when there is a proposal for the ramp-up period, which goes from 200 in the first year, 400 million, 600 million, and we end up, given current figures, this amount could be close to $1 billion. It seems to me that there should be an opportunity for a policy committee or two to really go through this, because I think for me, what's at issue is the oversight. And it's not as if in the state of California, whether at county level, state level, CalPERS, et cetera, any of these other organizations, we haven't had examples of expectations that aren't met, risks that should have been avoided, and underfunding as a result. So I think it's really important to have good oversight before we make these decisions. So I'm not at all comfortable with this. And just on a personal level, the government code currently, which is what you're restricted to, is a list of, as you, in your words, CSU's words, high quality, low risk securities. I happen to support high quality, low risk securities in my life. And certainly when it comes to the taxpayer dollar or students or agencies, I happen to support that. I think we've gone awry with risk and risk-taking behavior in finance at the local government level occasionally. We know about that, and at the state as well. And there's so many things that maybe could be answered and could be appropriate, make a good policy, restricted, lots of oversight. But this isn't it for me today. So thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Wolk. Senator Block.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I come at this from a very different perspective than the previous speakers, and I start, though, with the same words that my good friend from Riverside said, which it's, and I think I wrote them down verbatim, it's our responsibility to make sure the CSU is funded appropriately. That is our responsibility. We have not done that. Not because we didn't want to fund the CSU, because there wasn't revenue available. For a lot of reasons, we have not funded the CSU appropriately out of our general fund dollars. So there are buildings on CSU campuses that almost look like third world buildings that are frankly crumbling. You have places like Fresno State where buildings are closed because they're in need of repair that we, who are supposed to be funding appropriately, that we haven't taken care of. Not because we don't want to, but because the taxpayers, the revenue at least hasn't been there, or at least we haven't used it for this. So that leaves the question then, if we're not funding them appropriately, should we give them a little bit of entrepreneurial leverage to fund themselves? And that's what this does. Much less freedom than we give the UC already. And that's part of the reason the UC has done a much better job of maintenance and capital outlay, because they have more freedom. Much less freedom this bill is than many of the public and private universities around the United States already have. So this is a very modest proposal. And yes, things can go bad. But I think we need to take a tiny bit of risk here to be willing to provide the CSU with the opportunity to do what they need to do to maintain their buildings and to do capital outlay. I mean, that's just how I see it. Now, is there oversight? In our notes here, it tells us that the trustees have to receive an investment performance report quarterly, not annually, but quarterly. And who are the trustees? This is not a wild-eyed group. These are fairly conservative, mostly business people, including the governor, who, as we know, is tight with money. And if the investments aren't going well, first of all, the CSU doesn't want to see investments not go well. They will taper things down if there's problems. Secondly, the trustees will certainly limit them if they're not doing a good job, and then they do it quarterly reports, so it's not like this will get out of hand. So to me, I think we have a responsibility. Either we put up by giving them the money they really need, or we let them be a little tiny touch entrepreneurial here. So I'm supporting this.
Thank you, Senator Block. Senator Stone, then Senator Allen, and Senator Pavley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to say that I associate my comments with just about everything that's been said, especially my esteemed colleague from Riverside. You know, as a very active private investor, you know, I can take chances. I play in the stock market. I play in real estate actively. If I make money, God bless me, I'll pay the taxes. If I lose money, I got a little bit of a write-off. But I have a different perspective when you're dealing with the public treasury. And being in the city government, being in the county government, we had the local agency investment fund. We pooled it in there. And it was always best to err on the side of making sure that the public treasury was never in jeopardy. And one thing I've learned in the private sector is that the higher the return, the more risk you're taking. And so I'm not saying I wouldn't support an endeavor for the Cal State to invest in instrumentation that may give them a better return. But one thing I haven't heard is the diversification in the investments. And that's where we're kind of getting into the weeds, I know, but there is ways in which you can boost your return, but at the same time protecting yourself from swings. Like we've seen most recently in the stock market, a 2,800-point decrease in the past week. Certainly in 2008, I don't think I would have wanted to have too much in the way of real estate investments being invested with public money. So, you know, we are responsible collectively for ensuring that the public treasury is protected. I would like to see the performance of what the Cal State's been doing, what the rate of returns have been. I'd like to see the performance of where you anticipate you want to go, and how does this compare and contrast to the way STRS invests or the way that PERS invests. I know PERS has had a goal of achieving a 7.5% return. I think, if I'm not mistaken, their return in the last fiscal year might be around 2.5%. This next year, it could be dramatically different because of the shifts that we've seen, certainly in the stock market. So I don't know if this is going to pass today. I'd like to get more information. I want to feel comfortable that we're minimizing risk and trying to, of course, you know, maximize the kind of return that you want, because the last thing I want to do is just blanketly give you the approvals, and we have a policy that the legislature is not intimately aware of, and we find ourselves not having a 0.7% guaranteed pretty much return, but we find ourselves with a 2 or 3 point return on ultimately what could be $1 billion. We could be talking about a lot of money. A lot of buildings are going to get closed instead of refurbished, and I just think we have a fiduciary responsibility, if we're going to allow for this permission, that we got to make sure we're on solid ground.
Thank you, Senator Stone. Senator Allen.
Well, it's been an interesting discussion, and I very much share the concerns that have been raised about process, and I certainly think that more information is not bad at all, and maybe ultimately it's going to be required, because I'm hearing that the mood around the table. I mean, my tendency is to be supportive of this, just because, you know, having served on the Board of Regents and seeing the challenges and the difficulty, but also the opportunities that exist, you know, we do act, you know, we are operating in a complicated and fluid world, and we can't guarantee, you know, that everything is always going to be perfect. But it does seem to me that the way this is written and the way it's been crafted is limited. We're talking about mutual funds here. You know, they've put in all sorts of limitations. We're not talking about junk bonds. We also have empowered this board of trustees to make the difficult decisions necessary to keep the CSU afloat and to keep them running smoothly. I've certainly had no evidence that they don't take this responsibility very, very seriously. And so my tendency is to be supportive of this really rather limited measure that, as the Senator for San Diego says, is quite a bit more modest than the powers currently granted to the University of California, and with which this is actually an area of the budget that they've handled really, really well. So you know, so that's my thoughts. I certainly would never be opposed to having more information, but you know, we have chronically underfunded this institution. Their board is trying to figure out ways to be able to take advantage of mechanisms that are out there to, you know, to take minor, you know, low-level risks that could actually help the institution, and I think something in this direction needs to be done. Whether it's this particular form or not, I think it's in the right direction.
Thank you, Senator Allen. Senator Pavley.
Yes, I wanted to thank Senator Allen for that, his comments, because that's what I was trying to grapple with. If the UCs have been using this tool and the CSUs want the same sort of opportunity, if you will, but even more narrowly defined for capital outlay purposes, have the UCs suffered tremendously with tuition spikes and students? I don't understand why the CSUs would be treated differently. What is
There's a lot of historical reasons why the two university systems have very different authorizing statutes and constitution in the terms of the UC, and so they've really grown up differently.
to manage?
Yeah. So this is an area where the UC has had a lot more authority for many, many years, and the CSU has been much more limited.
They made tons of mistakes along the way?
Did the UC?
I think there's been a mixed record, but that...
The position is oversight. So with this so narrowly focused on capital outlay and use of mutual funds, being a CSU graduate, Fresno State, and Cal State Northridge, I am thinking about places like Cal State Channel Islands, the newest state college in the system, a little over 10 years old, who has never received adequate funds to build the needed infrastructure for it. This would give them, as long as you have the proper oversight, the opportunity to house and provide spaces for students who are lining up trying to get in. It's the only state college in Ventura County or Santa Barbara County area. And so it seems it's a manageable risk with the quarterly reports and with a legislator providing the oversight. I do share the opening comments of Senator Allen. It's getting to be continually more frustrating to have proposals not go through the policy committee. So many come through the May revise, and we're lots of times we're continually frustrated with it because we're not in a position, which we should be, to provide the oversight if we don't have that opportunity to have all these aired. That's an ongoing concern that I hope you'll share with people, and I don't care what setting this is in. I will be supporting this today, but building in, hopefully, that criteria and the oversight that we count on the CSU Board of Trustees to administer this correctly with minimal risks.
Thank you, Senator Pavley. And Senator Roth, you had another question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a clarification and then a question. So 0.7% rate of return now. You mentioned 3 to 5% rate of return is what the plan is. Is that after you deduct the cost of the investment advisors, which I thought you mentioned at 2%, or does the 2% come out of the 3 to 5?
The 2% is what would be distributed for expenditure on increased capital outlay expenditures or additional deferred maintenance projects. The 3 to 5% is the overall return goal. In terms of costs, I'm not sure how those are.
I don't think that they've narrowed that policy down to a level of detail where that includes the investment management costs or not.
So, I mean, I think it's been said several different ways by several different people. In essence, we're being asked they want to take on more risk and roll the dice to cover the maintenance costs for facilities that we're not funding as a state. And I guess that's what this comes down to. So what I need to do personally is to evaluate how much risk I'm willing to have them take as a legislator to the extent I get to decide that. And I'm having trouble. In the first place, we don't have any presentation from CSU as to what the real plan is by the people who are going to be designing it and implementing it. One. And two, let me ask this question, and then I'll be quiet, Mr. Chair. What would be the harm in bringing this back the harm to CSU in bringing this back in January or February for a more robust discussion with more detailed presentations by the folks that are actually going to be designing the plan and implementing the plan. Is there some urgency to this, that CSU has to get this money in the market? Probably not now, but hopefully when it, maybe now is the good time.
Buy low.
No.
Is that a fair
It probably does mean a year delay. I mean, the proposal was to start with the 200 million amount in the 16-17 year. If we wait till January, it seems more realistic that you would wait until the 17-18 year to start the policy.
Senator Roth, if I could, and we do have
I mean, that is just a factual statement in terms of.
another question from Senator Anderson, which we'll get to in a moment. I was going to propose to you, Ms. Vossler, that we have a few options here. My assessment of the conversation this afternoon is that there may not be sufficient votes. So if you would like a motion and a vote taken, we can certainly do that, though, as I say, I don't know that there is support today. Another option then, as Senator Roth suggests, is that you do bring this back to us in January. There have been any number of suggestions of the additional kinds of information that we would like to hear from you about, so that we can make a more informed decision. And should you be very successful in your presentation and convincing arguments, there is likelihood that we could put an urgency on it and that we could have this completed more thoughtfully by the end of January. And so there wouldn't really be that much time lost. Otherwise, it could be a traditional policy bill in January with simple majority to move this through the second year of this two-year session. So those are pretty much the options that we have before us right now.
Yeah, I think it makes sense for us to go back and get some of the information that we think actually exists right now. I mean, the analysis has been done, but clearly need to do more communication. So I think we'll hold the bill for now. So.
And Senator Anderson, you had a comment.
I'm hoping that when you come back, perhaps you could answer this. Look, I'm all for optimizing our return so that we can maximize the value to our taxpayers. Is there anything in it that caps the return? Let me put it in perspective, because these are all tied together. So what I'm concerned most about is, since we're relying on this return for doing real work, and by the way, my first choice would be to fund it from our budget, not take any risk. But a lot of times when you're counting on that money and you don't get the return that you want, because it's not the expected return that you had anticipated, sometimes the temptation is to perhaps go with something that's a little riskier to make up the difference. And maybe you're only going risky with 2% of the money, but the idea is that you're hedging against in one of the strategies that sometimes people use. In long-term financing, the same person may not be on that job for that whole time. So they may be looking at it for a short-term return on a long-term scheme. I shouldn't use the term scheme, long-term strategy. So to offset these budget pressures, what in your plan would help offset those budget pressures that would limit a person for not being a little riskier? Because we talked about low risk, but I don't know what that means. We've talked about the type of return that we're looking at, but I'm not sure. And even in the definition of what kind of vehicle, I'm not sure I fully understand that either. So what would be the protections to cap the risk? And what would be the protections to make sure that we don't lose principal at the end of the day?
I mean, it's really the close oversight by the trustees and the committee that will be overseeing the investment portfolio and the recommendations. So I mean, it's really the close oversight of those trustees that is key. And so in terms of, the plan, there isn't anything specifically that caps a return, but the overall investment plan, the 3 to 5%, that is a plan. Obviously, the people who are doing the investments are going to be the ones that are making a determination about what that is, but that oversight by the trustees to ensure that it's not going into higher risk investments, that oversight is really the key component here.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Anderson. We do have a couple more comments. Senator Block and then Senator Allen.
Yeah, mine is just pursuant to your suggestion that this be revisited in January. I would suggest that it come to Budget Sub 1 and that Sub 1 have a hearing inviting all members of the Budget Committee to attend so we can give it a thorough vetting. Now, if a member, of course, wishes to introduce a policy bill as well that mirrors this, it would go through the Policy Committee, the Education Committee, as well as Budget Sub 1. But that's where I would suggest it come.
Thank you, Senator Block. Senator Allen.
I just want to throw out the idea that, our entire state budget is perhaps, more subject to market volatility than the CSU's budget would be under this proposal.
Thank you, Senator Allen. So consider that a first informational hearing on the proposal that you brought forward, and I think a valuable one for all of us. Colleagues, we have 4 bills on call. If you have voted on all 4 bills, feel free to leave, and thank you for your attentions today. But otherwise, we are going to lift the calls, and we'll take them in numeric order, starting with item number 1. And as you leave the room, as you leave the room, please keep it as quiet as possible so we can conclude our business. So if you could call the absent members on item number 1, please, AB 126.
AB 126 was due pass. Anderson? Anderson, no. Mitchell? Morlock? Morlock, yes. And Pavley? Pavley, aye. So that's 12-3.
12-2 or 12-3?
12-3.
12-3, that motion passes. Item number 2, if you could call the absent members, please.
AB 127, due pass. Anderson? No. Anderson, no. Bell? Mitchell? Morlock? Aye. Morlock, aye. Pavley? Pavley, aye.
10-4?
10-4.
Motion passes 10-4. And if you could please lift the call on item number 3.
AB 128, due pass. Anderson?
I apologize. I'm sorry.
Item 3, AB 128.
Aye. Anderson, aye. Mitchell? That's 15-0.
15-0, the motion passes. Item number 4.
AB 129, motion is due pass as amended. Anderson? Aye. Anderson, aye. Mitchell? Wynn? So that's 14-0.
14-0. Item number 4. This motion passes. So that concludes our work today here. Thank you all for attending. And we're not taking up the 5th item, and we only have 5. No. We stand adjourned. Thank you.